Welcome, everybody. If you're new here, I'm Jaden Jeffs. I left the FLDS cult, and now I'm doing a podcast talking about 666 and other strange things that you might, for some reason, you clicked on this video and now you're listening and tapping in because this whole thing that you're even living in is a simulation, and now you came into mine a little bit. It's a strange world, I'm telling you. But I've always been fascinated by the numbers 666, 777, 888. I shouldn't say always, but in like religious terms, growing up, for us, the Lord created the heaven and the earth in 6 days. Then on the seventh day, he rested. 7 is kind of a number of unity and finishing something. 8 is kind of what's after that. And Jesus in Greek numerology, so if you take the number and replace it with or you take the letter and replace it with the number, then Jesus is 888, right? One interesting thing is today is 824, and 8 goes into 24 3 times, and 888 is Jesus. So just saying. Another crazy fact is I'm going to say this wrong, and if you get at me because I'm saying things barely wrong, then I'm sorry. I probably need to go to a vocabulary class. Mount Vesuvius erupted August 24th, 79 AD. And I don't know. I guess 824 is just like a number of destructive energy, which I may bring a little bit of here today, but I don't think too much. I actually think religious energy, or the energy of these religious leaders, is often pretty destructive in a way that, or what they leave behind in the groups is pretty destructive. I think that a lot of the religious people, like if you take the Mormon culture, for example, I think they never truly experience the energy that some of these religious leaders did. And I don't talk about this very much, but a lot of these religious leaders, they have this insane energy to them. And I kind of think of energy as amoral. But I don't think religious leaders or any of these past religious leaders have thought of energy that way. Energy in these religious leaders it's like they experience something and they bring facts or not facts, but they bring this way of life into realization, and then people follow it for thousands of years without ever recognizing what the energy was that made that individual bring all these ideas into the world. Anyway, that kind of fascinates me, but I want to talk about 666. In the Bible, it says, Revelations chapter 13, verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. And 666 is often looked at as a bad number. For this very reason, it comes from Revelations. It manifests itself in so many areas in like sacred geometry. If you don't know what sacred geometry is, then just Google it or something. It's basically like where nature manifests geometry and sacred, what people call sacred numbers. Look, when I say sacred geometry or sacred numbers, it's not like I think, oh, they're so sacred or anything. It's just, they're interesting to me. And these religious leaders, for some reason, were all really big on sacred numbers for whatever reason. Back to Revelations, where it says, it's the number of a man. Man are made up of carbon, and the carbon atom has 6 protons, 6 neutrons, and 6 electrons. And I find that interesting. Like, it is, I think there's details in the Bible that people just don't understand. And everything is energy. And I don't think there's really any such thing outside of energy. A lot of times I say, oh, maybe we're in a simulation, but I really don't believe that. I believe we are energy, and it's kind of crazy to think that we're these apes with this insane amount of energy. I know people don't like to think of it that way, especially religious people and these other, they like to think that we're made in the image of God, and hey, we are. But they like to think of the resurrection and all that kind of stuff in the sense that, oh, these bodies are so special. I think truly spiritual people, and even people like Joseph Smith or Jesus or people like that, and I know people are going to be getting on me for like lumping those guys together, but I don't think Jesus and Joseph Smith are the same, just if you're wondering. I think Jesus was really special in the sense that he understood energy and more about the spiritual world than maybe anybody else. It's crazy because literally time kind of goes off Jesus. We say after Christ or before Christ, like, doesn't matter what religion you are or anything, like, you go off of Jesus's time. So he is an interesting figure in the consciousness of man. I don't really know what to make of that, but I do think that a lot of religious people never understand the complexity of all these situations. And religion, this idea of God, I think, has been so harmful to so many people. More harmful than it has been good when you really look at the history of religion and understand that humans have just been trying to figure this out, and that the universe and the mathematics of the universe are insane. And a number like 666 is the number of man. If you take the numbers 1 plus 2 plus 3 all the way up to 36 and add them up, they're exactly 666. Like for the hexagon, it has a six-sided symmetry, and you'll see that in like snowflakes or like sometimes in beehives where, nature just naturally makes those shapes. That's why it's called sacred geometry. 777 is interesting because it's like the completion. In Book of Revelations, it says like the 7 trumpets, the 7 seals, and the 7 trumpets, and the 7 churches. But it's kind of like the completion and the perfection of something in religion. Mathematically, I don't think that a lot of, carbon or just physical elements add up to 7. I think 7 is kind of like this odd number. I don't know. Dad was big on it, and for weird reasons, right? He would have these quorums of 7 wives, which is odd. That's not why I'm big on 7. But all through religious history, you'll find these guys that were weird that way, where they were big on these 7s, these quorums of 7s, or, even Joseph Smith, he's big on a quorum of 12, or there has to be at least 7 apostles to do certain work in the temple and things like that. In Mormonism, that doesn't come from Dad. That probably comes from Joseph Smith. Or one of the crazy things is a lot of this numerology comes from the Freemasons and these secret societies. And one of the weird things is there is a lot of hidden knowledge, and I think secret societies will always exist. I don't think the Freemasons went anywhere. They're named different things. They're different places now. Wherever I think the most evil and the most good, if you could see that in the world manifesting, it would be in a secret society. And the rest is somewhere in between. I think the most good people might be in secret societies. I think some of the worst, most evil people are probably in secret societies. Secret societies are interesting because you have these groups of people that come together and bind together over this knowledge of something, hidden knowledge that they find in common. Or I guess in older times it was like religious traditions. The Freemasons were like weird because they were really kind of religious almost. I don't like secret groups, but I also don't hate all secret groups. I think that there's some crazy secret groups in the world today. I think the most insane secret groups that have ever existed probably exist today. We just don't know about them. Of course we don't know about them. In the history of the world, I guess that's how the FLDS think of it. The first 6,000 years are the 6,000 years of just trial and error, humans coming. The seventh is the millennium. It's a time of peace and harmony. And the eighth is when the earth will be celestialized. I think that's kind of how that comes from Joseph Smith, and who knows, he probably got it from the Freemasons or something. I don't know. Joseph Smith was a crazy guy. He was really up in the spiritual world, having all kinds of visions, and I don't hate him for it. A lot of Mormons think I hate Mormons, but I actually find them fascinating because when I sit there and talk to an LDS person, it's more like I can only talk to you in the confines of your beliefs, and that's my struggle with them. That's my frustration. They think, oh, you hate LDS people and you're getting evilly frustrated at them. And it's like, well, yeah, sometimes I do, but that's why. Because in the context of the world and everything, you can only have the conversation with them in the limited confines of Mormonism. You can't step outside of them. And they might say, well, step outside of them, let's talk. And the answer to that is, if your beliefs are so hardcore in Mormonism, then it's impossible, because you won't take the considerations that I'm offering seriously. And that's my frustration, I think, with, these videos are just private conversations that I have where I get flustered at Mormons. I think that's why. And if you look at the history of religion and sacred geometry and all these numbers, they're all tied together into ancient cultures and, past civilizations. It's so insane. And we're all sitting here like these religious rules are what we have to follow. And I think a lot of times the religious rules are good. They bring about more spiritual energy or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're limiting so many people from truly experiencing, spiritual energy. And one of the ways I like to think of it is like we kind of had this spiritual battle, sort of, with my dad. I think he had an amazing understanding of a lot of things, and that's what I can't really explain to people, because he did a lot of evil things. And specifically what I'm talking about is, spiritual energy. And he learned all this stuff from Joseph Smith. And a lot of modern day Mormons have no idea. They've never even tapped into it or experienced or understood a lot of things that my dad did from Joseph Smith. And I'm not saying all those things are right or anything. And maybe in that spiritual realm, that's why I was saying energy is amoral, because in that spiritual realm, it's hard to tell what's right and wrong. It's much harder, I'm telling you. And you think more in terms of things that bring more energy are right. That's kind of how it is. That's why the whole polygamy thing. I mean, people just, they don't understand it because they haven't experienced or been closer to this energy. And another thing about both those guys is they were pretty disciplined. I only talk about those two because I'm so familiar with them. You know, one's my dad and the other one I studied my whole life, and so did my dad. That's why I talk about them. But I'm also consider myself kind of free from them, in the sense that I think they were so blinded by the belief in God that, you know, they viewed all these things, like even the number 666. You could have a long conversation with either of them about that, but they would view it only in terms of God this and God that. And I guess the way I look at all this stuff is kind of like everybody does, you know, it's just the universe. But I also acknowledge that these guys had they had tapped into some sort of energy. And I've heard a lot of people explain this energy, and I've felt this energy a lot myself, and I think everybody in the world experiences this energy more or less. But I guess the connection that I think a lot of people miss is that my dad and Joseph Smith actually did a lot of things they did because they were like deep into this stuff. And that's my belief, kind of. It's also the reason I've come to believe that energy is amoral. You know, if you can go into another dimension, it doesn't necessarily mean you're good. If you figure out certain laws of physics, even if you don't understand how you figured them out, that doesn't necessarily mean you're good. It just means you figured them out. And, like, you know, energy can do almost anything, and it's just so amoral that humans, they moralize everything, and then it becomes super hard to comprehend the spiritual realm. But I think the spiritual and the physical realm actually have no separation. I think as physics advances, the spiritual realm they will find is just a more refined version of the physical realm. You know, I don't think, you know, and how the energy works and everything, I think it's really similar to, you know, the physical world. Well, but I think there's a lot more secrets there, and that's really where the hidden knowledge of the universe is. The reason why people get caught up in these cults is because there's a certain energy there that they've never experienced and they don't understand. You can take people that will sit there and say, I would never join a cult ever in my life. How can these people do this? They're going insane. They're so crazy. Take one of those people and give them an experience in this energy from an individual in a particular belief. Give them that experience, and they'll be like, wait, I'm in. I didn't realize this other world existed, is kind of how they're feeling. And that's my point about cults, is it's a lot more energy. It has a lot more to do with energy and this other stuff, and it can be evil. It really can be evil. But that doesn't mean it isn't energy. And a lot of times the beliefs of these cults are so destructive that they end in death. Anyway, I just put 666 in the title because I thought it's an interesting number to me, but so is 777 and so is 888. And, you know, like, to me, the whole 369 thing is a pretty interesting topic too. But, you know, I don't have enough facts just on my head to talk about that. But I love watching things about it, and I love learning about it. But I do think energy is the secret to manipulation and controlling people. And one of the things about, you know, you hear a lot of women say, I'm following my intuition. And I think people's intuition is often right. I don't think women's intuition is that much different than men's. I mean, I'm sure it protects them from men in certain situations, but at the end of the day, like men's intuition also is very similar. I think that intuition is often right, but can be hijacked. Your intuition can be hijacked by, a really religious person, or someone that really understands religious energy, or even if they don't understand it, if they're tapped into it, then it can distort how that person feels, and their intuition, right, can really change their energy fields. I think all this to me is like physics. I think that when when the physics catches up, and all this stuff will just be understood on a physical level more than it will, in spiritual terms. I don't think any of this is, you know, some divine anything. I think it can all be understood through physics and through energy. I think there's a thing you can learn. Like there's electrical engineering, right? But I'm thinking is if there's a physics energy uh, degree. I don't know. That's what I would like to get. But yeah, I really believe that the spiritual world is energy, and it's way more amoral than humans will ever accept, because you can have that energy, and you can kill somebody, you can and actually have that energy increase, and not in the adrenaline sense that a lot of murderers might kill somebody. I mean more in a spiritual sense. That doesn't mean it's right. It means that we don't. There's a lot of things about the spiritual world we don't understand, and there's all these conspiracy theories about the elite in the world. There always has been, and there always will be, because of these things. But I think that I think the time will come when we have a greater understanding of these things. And, scientifically, and they're not just mystical wonders that people swipe aside as, oh, you're crazy type of a thing, like they do today. And if you're wondering, when I see religion, I almost always think of religious people in this sense. When I see a new religion, I am like, I want to know the energy about these people and how it operates and what is in their minds. That's what I'm interested in the instant I see or hear about a new religion. When I hear about Scientology or something like that, Scientology, of course, there's a religion called Scientology. Of course there is. uh, these people, it's so easy to get caught up in these crazy beliefs when you get into the spiritual realm. But I think that all these people, they start believing that it's God, or because it is where the paranormal kind of happens. But I don't think it's that paranormal. If you really understand it, I don't think it's like against physics or anything. Anyway, I hope I don't sound too crazy here. And this is another reason I also like physical work and business, is because business, the money always has to add up, and physical work, it reminds you of how insignificant you are, and it makes you ask the question of why am I doing this? If you do something really hard, to the point of exhaustion. And then you just, at the end of the day, at least this is what it does for me. It really pushes the question of why. Why am I doing this? And I think that without that, a lot of times I get just a little bit carried away. And it's like, I think if I ever got to the point, financially where I didn't need to physically work hard, it would be, I think I would still run or do something really physical, because I don't know, it just reminds you of your existence and makes you keep pushing for the why in what you're doing, or even in your existence. I mean, this whole thing of existence is never going to go away from me. I will always be in pursuit of why, and I guess in that pursuit comes a lot of this numbers and sacred geometry. In my quest for understanding religion, it's pulled me in so many different directions that a lot of people just in religion just can't comprehend, because their religious beliefs, like I was saying before, you can't talk to them about these things, because if somebody has a certain belief, they're not going to have a true conversation about something outside of that belief. That's why people say, oh, you're bitter towards the Mormons, or you're bitter towards religion, or you're bitter towards whatever. It's like, no, I'm not bitter. I do come to these points of frustration, because in my own mind, when I'm trying to push these conversations with different people, and then I continually run into these barriers of their religious beliefs getting in the way, or even if they're not religious beliefs, getting in the way of that, and you start trying to push these conversations, and they act like that world doesn't even exist. And then I kind of boil to the point of frustration, and then I'll make a video like going off on them or something like that. But the truth is, like, yeah, it's probably me just not controlling my temper all the time, I'm controlled, I'm measured, but I think it's genuine frustration. Like, there's a world beyond what you see, and there's a world beyond your beliefs. And to me, I used to struggle with purpose a lot more. I don't struggle with purpose as much now, because this whole thing has fascinated me so much. It kind of has become my purpose. And I think when people leave religion, they struggle with a purpose. But if you go down this hole, or this, I don't know, to me it's existence, then you become more and more fascinated by learning all these things. It's like, what? I did not know that. That's so crazy. Anyway, 666 is not a bad number. It's one of the most beautiful numbers. I guess in the Bible, there's a few places that it says good things about it, like Chronicles 9:13. Now the weight of the gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 666 talents of gold. Do you really think Solomon got exactly 666 talents of gold and just randomly recorded it in the Bible? No, it's like, it's a symbol of wealth. In the physical world, 666 might be a good symbol of wealth. It might even be that way in some cultures. 777, it's crazy the numbers that line up with 777 in kind of the spiritual realm. I really wonder, like, all the mathematics in physics, if you were able to measure all those higher frequencies. Like, I promise I'm not going crazy. It's just these, you can go through life curious about this kind of stuff, and a lot of people on the way will stop you and say, hey, don't go down that hole. Don't investigate this. Don't look at that. It's going to make you crazy. And to me, I'm kind of like, I don't want to go crazy, but at the same time, I've got to know these things. And I guarantee you, the secret societies today are way more insane than the Freemasons were or anybody else, because there's way more science and there's way more understanding of all this stuff than there ever has been. And the world just is crazy. But also, for all the people that say it's all bad, I would just say we're living today better than any king or queen did 200 years ago. Any. The average person is living better. I'm living a better life than, with my phone and instant access to information and all this stuff. I'm living a better life than they did 200 years ago. And it's not all bad. Yeah, we kind of probably got off on the wrong track in it all, and so a lot of people are unhappy. I think that I hope that AI will make so that people will do way more of the task for people so that people can get back to connecting like they used to. I think that AI should do most of the physical labor for us. And as humans, we should be more interested in living happy, and the money system shouldn't be so, I don't know, I don't like it. I think AI should be utilized as much as we can. I'm not scared of AI taking away the job. I hope AI takes away every job and makes so that people, the scary thing about that is people can't control their destiny because they can't control their money, but the world that would be ideal would be if nobody needed money to do anything. It just was a fundamental fact that AI made everything so easy that you can just have what you need, and people could just be, I know this is going to bring a whole bunch of totalitarian comments and stuff, which makes sense because that's the fear of AI. It would be easy to bring people to a totalitarian state, but I don't know. Anyway, I'm just rambling. And again, when you kind of break out of these deep thought processes on this stuff, then you're kind of like, dude, am I going crazy sometimes? But then you're like, no, this is real stuff, and we can pay attention to it. We can be fascinated by it. We can be interested in it. Or we can just let life happen to us. I think humans in general would be better off to be interested in this stuff and not having to work so hard. Or it's a different kind of work, I guess. AI to me is a good thing, as long as we can keep it from being like a bad thing, totalitarian stuff, especially where other humans are using it to control other humans. And of course they are. Like, energy is amoral. That's the thing about it. If you create a really wise AI, I'm not so sure that it's going to be like, no, we shouldn't kill those guys. Or, maybe, hopefully. But I'm not so sure. The common one does, because they trained it that way. They made sure it was going to say the right things to everybody. But AI is scary. It really is. And the thing that I wonder is when AI is able to figure out more spiritual frequencies, if that happens, then I would be terrified. But I wouldn't be that terrified because it would probably do something good, but not guaranteed. It's so crazy. This world we live in is so crazy. And a lot of people like to walk around super disinterested. And I guess I do too sometimes. Walk around like, oh, it's totally normal. But no, it's fascinating. It's like consciousness is the realization of the insane things that you don't know. Or I guess I shouldn't say that. It's when you become more conscious, you continue to be amazed by what you didn't know. Even going from being in the FLDS cult to being out of it, it's like you increase in consciousness because you're more aware, because someone was trying to control you, and then you like came above that mindset, and they might have even been controlling themselves, you know, and they can't, and then you come above that and you're like, what's real? And especially when you've, to some degree, I guess, experienced, I'm not saying I'm better than anybody too when I talk about the spiritual stuff. That's one of the things about Dad and Joseph Smith and those guys. They would think that they were gods or becoming close to God by experiencing these spiritual experiences. And it's like, no, actually, that's kind of the history of religion, you know, like a lot of people have experienced those things, and you better be careful believing that you're some special person type of a deal, you know. Because I think when you get that close to consciousness, the consciousness that is all things, possibly, you do feel like God somewhat. Because perhaps that consciousness holds all knowledge, and I think that when people get close to that, they they might truly believe that, and that's dangerous. But that doesn't mean they weren't able to get close to it, even though they did evil things. And like I was saying, this energy is so amoral. You can do evil things, and that doesn't mean that energy made you do them. It doesn't even mean that what you did won't increase the energy. It's so crazy. I think that there is something fundamentally evil about the energy that makes people do those things, though. And that's what I've been, like, I don't fully understand it. I don't fully grasp the concept of it. And I'm trying to understand it. But that's why sometimes when I think, like, we've had this spiritual battle with Dad, it's different than you might think, in the sense of just energy fields and spiritual energy. And I think a lot of people would disagree and be like, oh, this is just a bunch of brainwashed. It's like, no, you do not know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's interesting stuff, and science is so interesting, and technology is beautiful. It really is. Technology is so awesome. And it's all made possible, by physics. And it's crazy to think that for 3,000 years we just didn't know about any of this stuff. But I think I do not believe kind of the main history that common people believe, where I think there was ancient civilizations that understood a lot of this stuff, particularly about this energy. And that's why they were so big into the stars and everything. It's like, I don't know. It's my interest, I guess. These things are what I'm interested in. And when I'm interested in religion, I'm not just interested in, oh, you're brainwashed into this belief. Okay. Yeah, I can talk about that. But I'm interested in these numbers and the other spiritual stuff, because it's truly insane. It's like life. There is something more to life. And that's what I'm interested in religion. And it's so amoral, and that's what's terrified me. It's so amoral. And it truly is terrifying. And I think that ultimately energy will bring about good. But I think that there's probably some things that I just don't understand about it, but I think it's amoral to a terrifying extent. And that's why a lot of people say, oh, how did God allow these children to just be destroyed? And it's like, energy kind of is God. And they don't care. Like, truly. It didn't. And it is terrifying. And yet, energy brings about a lot of good things in us when we use it. I don't know. The whole religion thing is like a whole energy thing, I promise. The history of religion, clear back as far as it goes. And even intelligence itself, it's like it has to do with this. It has to do with this energy. Anyway, I am going to say something stupid if I keep going. So thanks, guys, for watching. If you're really knowledgeable or interested or think you could have a good conversation with me on the podcast about this stuff, I would love to. That is what I would love to do. Thanks, guys, for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Peace out.